Everybody, thanks for joining today. This is a presentation from a company I'm with called Island, and I can't wait to show you. This is a very game-changing technology. We're doing some really great stuff with something called the enterprise browser. And if you've never heard of what that is, you're going to learn a bit about it. You're also going to understand kind of how we helped Amazon on the .com side do some really revolutionary things, specifically with AI. And unfortunately, my co-presenter Adam could not make it today, so it's just going to be me as we go through this. And we will have some time for some questions if anybody would like to have, understand a little bit more about what this is. Obviously, our booth is back there, but we're going to have a roaming mic as well for questions. And there will be time for questions as well. So what is the big deal? What is the challenge here today? Well, the challenge is that we have these AI agents that can do a lot of stuff, but we need to make sure it's governed in a good way. And so today, we're thinking about the data governance that goes along with that. It's nothing. You can do basically whatever you want. The data, the sensitive data goes right in. There's really not a lot of governance to that. Data comes back out, and then we start talking about agentic AI, right? So when it's doing things, and it's really nice when it does things for you from a personal consumer type way, right? Maybe you give it your open table login and it does a reservation, that's cute. But then when we bring that into the business, we need different controls, we need different governance around it. So what we're going to talk about today is that control and that security and making sure it's reliable, and some use cases that Amazon found that really helped them drive some true value and some cost savings within their enterprise. So first, if you haven't heard about what this category is, it's probably the most exciting thing I've seen in tech for a long time. I've been in tech for a long time. This is super exciting. I've been with the company for 5 years. We started about 5 years ago. But in order to bring in data, and think about when your data gets brought to you, it's brought in usually through a web browser, some sort of an interface. And this is where it gets decrypted. And today it happens in a consumer browser that you use, right? So Chrome and Edge and others. And that's where that thing called SSL kicks in, and it does the big 2 prime numbers thing and magically brings you your data. And so, 5 years ago, or about 4 years ago rather, we launched the enterprise browser. And now we have controls over that. So this brought us data protection controls, it brought us delivery controls, it brought us things we could never do before, without trying to break open SSL and inspect the wire and see what the data was doing inside there. That's getting harder to do, as you guys know. So when we brought this to market, we put all the controls that are needed to also gain network access. So you think about this as really not just a browser, but really an enterprise workspace that gets you access to the data that you need to get to and governs and controls the data as it goes in and out of the organization. So that's kind of the basis of what we've done. And since we have brought this to market, we have some of the world's largest banks. I think we have most all of them at this point, at least in the top 10. We have some of the largest travel companies in the world, a lot of adoption in healthcare and BPOs, right? Because that's where the data leaks out. Unfortunately, this is where the operators can, potentially accidentally leak data or intentionally, deliberately leak data. And so we have, some fantastic customers that have proven that this technology, is real. They've invested with us, and obviously they're big companies that we have working with all around the world. So now we have AI, and this is kind of where we are. You guys are probably going to be flooded with all kinds of stuff around AI today, and tomorrow, and for the rest of the week. And it was cool. It's super cool technology. We started with the chatbots, that we got into thanks to ChatGPT and others. And then Anthropic created the protocol, so we can do our modeling protocols. We had connections. We brought in those AI agents, right? We're starting to also see consumer-based, AI browsers hit the market as well. So those are really focused on the consumer. So the challenge though is, what do we do with trusting the data? We need to make sure it's useful so that builders and developers can access back-end data, but they need to have governed access to the apps. They need to have governed access to the data, and it all needs to be audited in a secure and safe way. And what I mean audited, we need to see, what do they do? What did they click on? What data did they go to? Where did they move the data? Did they move it from this system to a different system? And unfortunately, in the world of AI agents, when that access is granted, it doesn't know much about the role of the user. And so, you might have somebody that has access to, the HR system, and they could query that. They could say, hey, what's the CEO's social security number? And of course, it's got access to that data. It could deliver that data, but the context of the role was missing, right? And so that's when it starts to get complicated. And the one thing between you and those roles is today an enterprise browser. It's today something that governs that activity and governs your access to what they can get to. Passwords, a good example of this are passwords. So yes, like I mentioned before, I don't mind giving somebody my open table account. That's a password. Maybe I don't give them my bank account. I certainly don't give them the keys to the corporate accounts, right? But that's where we are today. We need those credentials in order for AI agents to work. So how do we do this without giving those credentials to AI? And the answer is the enterprise browser. That's the way to do it, because that's where it can be injected. That's where data can make sure it's never exposed visually. It's never exposed on the wire. It can be sent securely. That's a big leg up for everything we need this to do. This is the future. When we start talking about these agentic AIs and you start seeing demonstrations and future plans for this is where the rubber meets the road. It has to be done in the browser. And we've already built this to create that technology and enable that in a way that's safe and secure. So, of course, we need to have collaboration, and this is a lot different than the consumer AI agents. Again, as I mentioned before, these are useful, these are great. These are great for the individual, not for the role within the corporation, right? So when we think about the enterprise grade requirements that we have, this is where we need to step it up. We need to say, what role is that user responsible for? What do they do within the company? Can they have access to that data? So that's where those enterprise AI agents really come into play. And so today, we are talking about the Island AI agents is something that we have introduced. This lets teams create, share, run, secure, reliable agents in the browser, and that's the place where you need them, right? So this is where we can control the data protection. This is where we can automate work across the businesses. We can keep the data protected. So this is agentic AI in an enterprise browser. Today we're calling it AI agents. And just to show you kind of how we've built this, there is a trust layer, and some of these are components within Island. So the Island components of private access, getting you to those network resources, already built in. The components of data protection, those layers are already built in. So when you create a model, it's very easy to create that model with a set of skills that are repeatable. And in order to do this, it's real easy. You just do it, guess what, inside of a browser. You hit the record button, you go through a series of steps, and some of those steps might be manual intervention. You might have somebody that needs to do something, approve something. After all, they've got access to the keys to the kingdom and everything else. So we need to make sure we have that audit trail, we have that visibility, and having those actions and that human oversight, it has to be done where humans work. And again, that's inside of that browser. And so we've built this with control policy into that hardened enterprise browser. It can access storage, secure storage. What's secure storage? Could be your cloud storage. Well, can I get there with Chrome and Edge? No, you used to, but now you have the enterprise browser. That's your only way to get there. That's also the agent's only way to get there, right? So we've created that closed loop system for that agentic AI to take over and be able to do the functions that are needed for the company. And of course, that full audit trail. This includes screenshots, mouse clicks, where did they type, what did they put in, what came back out, what did the screen look like? Full audit, full capability for that. And so when we have this governance and control, you have to think about, well, who's going to use it? Well, we got the modes set up so that a builder can build what they need to build for an AI, for an agentic AI within the browser. Again, do the record replay. We have the access to the applications. Those are running in a browser, whether they're PWAs or just basic web apps or maybe WebAssembly apps. And then of course, what they can do, right? What they can do, which button can they click on, which button can they never click on? That's kind of an important thing. If you don't want an agentic AI to accidentally click the big red button that deletes 20 instances of your EC2, right? That's going to be a challenge. That happens in a browser. That can be an agentic AI configuration. So that configuration is important. Can they just read the data or can they delete it, right? And so now we have that ability to give that oversight and deploy it with confidence. And so we can deploy this in a number of ways, obviously. The Island browser, it can be run in a remote browser, isolated browser environment. This is a locally running browser as well. So most of the activity that you do is going to run on the endpoint. It's going to run locally with your system, on your network, with your data, with your credentials. That's the productivity that we really wanted to see. And that's what we can integrate with Bedrock for that as well. So full integration with the AWS Bedrock so that you can keep your data. It can be stored within the Bedrock system, and it obviously built for scale for there. So what did Amazon.com do? So again, I mentioned that we have kind of a customer testimonial, and I was hoping Adam could be here to talk about it. But what they were able to do is they found a way to use our Agentic AI or Island's AI agents to build some real productivity within some of their key systems. And they did this in a few ways. But the whole point of this was that it was easy, and they put the hands in the folks that actually knew what they were doing, folks that know that it's a repetitive task. Right? If they're doing the same thing over and over again, they know that they could save time. So let's put the power of that automation into the hands of the folks that could use it. And let's make sure it's governed, and let's make sure it's safe. And so, this is kind of how it's done, pretty simple, as you can think about a record and replay. If anybody has been in IT as long as I have, you probably heard of Mercury Interactive. We used to record and replay scripts like Selenium scripts and COM and Corba and DCOM and all these different protocols. It's kind of like that, but super easy, because it's built into the browser. So all we do is you prompt the user with what workflow to build and include a set of skills along the way. And those skills could be click on this, search for this, do this button, take this PO number and copy it and paste it over here. And that's productivity that you can quickly do across applications. And again, this all happens within that governance of the browser. You validate it, you edit the flows if you need to, you add human interaction steps where those needed, and then of course you share that with your department and increase productivity. These are the 3 use cases, and I do want to have questions here in just a minute, but these are the 3 use cases that they actually put to work. So Amazon.com and their marketing teams and a few others, they're doing some really cool automations already as Island customers. And so what that means is their purchase orders, they're automating the updating of a lot of these manual tasks that are happening, as well as the social media team and the marketing team doing things across different platforms and moving data, adding tags to certain areas so that they can be quickly monitored a little bit better with those tags. But again, all things that they would just be naturally doing in the browser, we can automate that and make sure that they're now governed and safe. And again, that's that tag creation there at the bottom. So in particular, I liked this solution that he really wanted to showcase this himself. But the challenge here on this purchase order one, that top use case, was that they were spending, and I think it was 30 minutes per day for 1,000 users. So 30 minutes per day for 1,000 users today at Amazon right now are being saved because they've implemented this Agentic AI solution with the Island browser. And basically what it is, it's updating permissions, it's copying and pasting PO numbers, and before it actually gets executed, before they actually pay that bill, they get a little prompt that says, okay, we did all this work, is this the bill you want to pay? And they hit yes in the browser, and then it executes that transaction and actually pays the bill. So anyway, I think it's 80 cumulative hours per week, which is an amazing impact. Over 1,000 users, that's a big deal. So that's what I wanted to show today. Obviously, you can see the power. When you think about Agentic AI, if you're not thinking about what it can do within a browser context, you're not considering it thoroughly. Because this is where the data is, this is where you have access to the data. And now with the enterprise browser of Island, you've got the governance, the control, the audit, and you have that capability just naturally built in to a single ecosystem for that app delivery mechanism. And we'd love for you guys to come see a demo. This is something that I could talk about for 3 days, you still wouldn't get it. If you come see it, I guarantee you, it's not just a browser, it's a true enterprise delivery workspace. We'd love to give you a demo and walk you through it. We got just a few minutes for questions. If anybody has any, we've got a roaming mic coming through.